So, my name is Michael Muehlbauer. I work for the Philadelphia Orchard Project, which is a nonprofit that plants and supports community orchards and food forests across Philadelphia. I'm also the founder of a nonprofit endeavor to create a community-powered and public food forest in Fairmount Park here in Philadelphia. I work as a horticulturalist and operations manager at North Historic House and Gardens. I do consulting and design on the side as well. But I'm here to talk to you about food forest gardening, how this supports biodiversity, and ways that you can incorporate this into your landscapes on a home or larger scale. So I want you to imagine walking through a natural forest, observing the canopy and understory of shade-grown bushes, noticing little pockets where the sunlight shines through and encourages different plants to grow, a variety of niches and habitats. Food forest is a term for an agricultural strategy or gardening technique that mimics a woodland ecosystem or woodland edge ecosystem by intentionally substituting plants that produce desired yields of food, medicine, and fiber. The idea of a food forest is inspired by land management techniques, land management practices that are common in many indigenous cultures from different parts of the world, which has been studied, borrowed, and codified in the permaculture design concepts of Australians Bill Mollison and David Holmgren. A local example would be on the eastern seaboard, our woodlands used to be 1/3 American chestnuts. This supported a wide variety of wildlife up and down the food chain, as well as being a staple in indigenous diets. And then the European chestnut blight showed up and wiped out the entire species. So food forests are often simplified and described in these 7 layers. A food forest might consist of a canopy tree layer of large nuts and fruits, a subcanopy of smaller fruit trees, vines running up the trees or trellis, an understory of berry and other useful shrubs, edible and medicinal herbaceous vegetation, root crops, tubers, edible and otherwise functional ground covers. This mixed perennial system blends with the natural world and creates habitat and shares food with wildlife, insects, soil life, while encouraging a competitive web of life that balances out, mitigates, and lessens the need to disturb your natural system or combat pest and disease outbreaks in order to harvest a yield. This approach to agriculture and gardening is climate change adaptable, providing diversified, perennial, local food sources available in case that 1 or 2 things may fail or mass from year to year. For example, you could have a bumper crop of hickory this year. Last year was a mass of acorns, but there's very little this year. It's a terrible year for plums, but you have cherries and service berries to rely on this spring. Maybe your figs didn't produce, but you have jujubes and chokeberries this year. Perhaps it becomes impossible to grow apples and pears in this climate. But now it's warm enough to reliably grow pomegranates. This approach to agriculture could even mitigate climate change if adopted on a wide scale. Through the production of perennial woody and herbaceous plants that capture and sequester more carbon than produced, this would essentially be cooling the planet. In this system, soil is built and conserved by leaving biomass to decay in place through the regular addition of wood chips, the sloughing off of herbaceous perennial root masses, the inclusion of nitrogen-fixing plants, and by not disturbing the soil and encouraging the mycorrhizal fungal networks to thrive and assist your plantings. Planet Earth is a garden. And what is the most widespread gardening activity that affects climate and biodiversity? The clearing of forests and agriculture. Forest farming and food forest farming and gardening to mitigate climate change, produce habitat and resources shared with diverse ecologies, building and protecting our soils is gardening for biodiversity. This is a picture of the Beacon Food Forest in Seattle. It's a public land project, volunteer-powered, community-powered, to create a public example of the food forest garden. And I was involved there for 3 years before moving here to Philly. As initially said, in this system, we're mimicking the natural woodland edge, and even prairie systems. To speak a little more specifically about some plants that support your diverse ecology and the production of larger fruits and nuts in a food forest, we've heard a little bit about this today already, is to plant for pollinators and beneficial insects. I think this room might be on board already that it's much more important to support a diversity of native bees, humble, mason, mining, and other, than with propping up a system of relying on European honeybees to pollinate our food crops. Many of these native bees are much more effective at pollination as well. I have a pollinator and herb garden at Grumblethorpe that has a lot of Anise hyssop. It's a long-blooming, purple-flowered plant alongside a diversity of other medicinal and culinary herbs and pollinator plants. You can see 6 to 10 different types of bees in there at a time, even sleeping there overnight like it's a hotel. Flies, butterflies, wasps, beetles, ants, other insects play a role in pollination as well. Different insects prefer different flower shapes and colors. Beneficial insects like lacewings and ladybugs that eat aphids, and parasitic wasps that prey on the caterpillar stages of many pests affecting our common fruits, are especially attracted to flowers that are umbel-shaped, like fennel, Queen Anne's lace, parsley, or umbel-like flowers like yarrow and tansy. The main point here is to provide a variety of blooms throughout the season, different colors, different shapes, to support diverse insect life, including bees and other pollinators, as early, throughout, and as late in the season as possible. For example, the other day, I was excited to see my winter aconite blooming because my plums were about to bloom extremely early. But I saw bees buzzing around, checking out my winter aconite, and I was happy that if those plums bloomed early, they might be pollinated. Providing different ecological niches for insects in your landscape is also important for retaining insect populations. For example, leaving rotting wood and other insect hotels in various places, leaving your herbaceous stocks up over winter, provides nesting spots for native mining bees, solitary bees, instead of finishing that clean, crisp fall cleanup that gives a sterile look over winter. Pictured here, you see a parasitic wasp, bee balm, sweet cicely, flowering mint, tick seed, and a bumblebee on my favorite Anise hyssop. Another theme in food forest gardening is to supply your system with nutrients through the plants in your system versus the addition of synthetic fertilizers from outside sources. There are plants which are good at taking up certain minerals into their tissues. Many have deep taproots that mine minerals from the subsoils when they are available there. These minerals become available in the biomass, which can be mulched on the surface and become available to the entire system. When a mycorrhizal fungal network is well established, this can act as a distribution system that brings minerals from plant to plant or one area to another. As we heard earlier, mycorrhizal fungi have been studied and proven to form the symbiotic relationship with the roots of plants. The fungi colonize the root system, increasing access to water and minerals, while the fungi receive carbohydrates from the plant. One example of nutrient accumulation that has been studied is with yarrow. It's an incredibly powerful medicinal herb which supports pollinators at the same time and is also good at accumulating potassium, phosphorus, cadmium, and copper. Nitrogen-fixing plants, especially larger woody ones, supply nitrogen to your plants and system, also encouraging your fungal layer and diverse soil life to thrive while not disturbing your soil, contributes to nitrogen and other nutrient cycling, alongside the critters in your natural system. Pictured here are gummies, a woody nitrogen-fixing plant with edible fruit and lupine. An additional term found in food forest gardening is that of living mulch, which is just that, a ground cover. These can be edible, such as Roman chamomile, oregano, thyme, strawberries, wintergreen, nasturtiums. They can be nitrogen fixing, like clover. Suppressors can help suppress what you desire less, such as daffodils, creating a barrier to grass and bowls around fruit trees, aromatic plants such as chives and other onion family plants, and mint family plants like lemon balm and bee balm that have strong smells that can help mask the smell of your desirable fruit trees from the pests these plants commonly get. Many of these companion plants suggested for pollination, beneficial insects, nutrient accumulation, nitrogen fixing, or suppression are edible, medicinal, plain, aesthetically pleasing, or all of the above. And creating a diversified food forest garden with habitat for birds, snakes, spiders, and an array of insects can help control pests you're sure to get in a monoculture and highly disturbed system, which does not support biodiversity, but works against it. It's not that you won't have pests, especially if you're growing peaches, plums, cherries, apples, or other common fruits. But this system is more likely to balance itself out and conserve the environment in general through a reduction in inputs and chemicals, decreased water runoff, carbon sequestration, wildlife and beneficial insect food and habitat, and a diversified local food, medicinal, and fiber resource. Including lesser-known native edibles like hickory nuts, oaks, and the walnut family can supply sustainable and reliable sources of protein and fat to you and animals. Many viburnums have edible fruit that will support bird populations while also not requiring spray regimens. American persimmon supports small mammals and some birds, and pawpaws are delicious and nothing will eat them but us. If growing common fruits in a food forest, you will lessen your use of pesticides and fungicides by using more cultural controls and cultivating a competitive ecology. This way, you are less attractive to pests than a monocrop. You may while growing a variety of other crops that have less issues blended in with those that do, which you can also rely upon. So let's say you're interested in the food forest idea, and you want to start with a postage stamp city yard. You have room for 1 Asian persimmons, you put 3 pawpaws in 1 hole, you have 3 blueberries, You select a gumi for your nitrogen fixing, spread clover all over the place, and you have a mix of medicinal and culinary herbs on your sunny edge. I want you to imagine modern farms, large fields of corn and soy all over the country. The amount of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides used, and the amount of biodiversity in that field, affected downstream, in your gut when you eat it. What has happened to the entire continent and all over the world? Now I want you to imagine an organic farm. Maybe it's even no-till. And the amount of biodiversity, perhaps more, supported in that field, downstream. Your gut and body doing a little better than before. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. I like vegetables too. But now imagine all of the biodiversity supported in this 23-year-old food forest, now older than when this picture was taken. You can see the potential for life in there, right? Imagine people mobilized to start planting these systems and what that could do. You could do it on 1/10 of an acre or less in your small yard with 1 fruit tree guild or a handful of fruit trees, berry bushes, multifunctional herbs, and ground covers. You could do it on a 10-acre, 100-acre farm, specializing in a handful of nuts and small fruits. You could do it as a community food forest on public land, like us, which we are about to embark upon in Fairmount Park. Do this and you'll have the best stuff all season long while supporting biodiversity and the health of the planet. It would make a significant difference if adopted on a large scale. Through mixed perennial systems that integrate with the natural world like this, we can supply a lot of our needs and turn this ship around while we still can. Thanks for having me. It's been an honor and a pleasure. Happy gardening.